Good morning, everybody, and first an apology for some of the technical difficulties we've had here. And we appreciate all of the people at ESF that worked feverishly over the last 15 minutes to fix this, but here we are. So again, good morning. My name is Mark Lichtenstein. I'm the Chief of Staff and Chief Sustainability Officer here at the college. Let me just go through a couple of things, and we're going to get right into it because I know, again, we're running late. This is one of a number of virtual sessions that we've been having via Instagram Live, Facebook Live, and ESF TV, YouTube, which you're watching now. And this is all related to the fall semester, the reopening, and our attention to COVID-19. We've done sessions on the overall restart plan, academics, such as plans for classes, student life, one focused just on graduate student issues, and student finance. You can find all of these recorded at esf.edu/restart. We'll put all these links in the chat box here in a minute. And any other links that we talk about or email addresses, we'll be sure that we put that in the chat function. Okay, today's town hall is going to focus on health and safety, critically important. I want to also, though, reference that there are other updates on the ESF Restart page. We've had numerous working groups. We're going to hear about that today from our speakers that are working on this issue. We updated our restart plan that SUNY has to review and approve. That was updated last week. We made mention of this. It is also available on that restart page address that I gave you. And many things are being pushed via our social media channels and email. I want to reiterate something I said last week. If students are having any email problems, not receiving some of our messages, please let us know. There's a number of reasons why we think this is happening. Some are your mailboxes might be full. Some have opted out of our constant contact, the use of that tool. The syr.edu address sometimes causes problems, and there's a host of other things. So please let us know, and you can do so at communications@esf.edu. communications@esf.edu. I'll put that in the chat box in a minute. Our primary goal is to provide the safest work and study location for all of you. That is our number one goal. Nothing else trumps that. So we do encourage your feedback and questions today and after today if you have any concerns at all. So let me do some introductions before I come back and provide you with some guidance on how we'd like to deal with Q&A today. First, to my left is John Wasel. John is our Environmental Health and Safety Officer. John has been here since 1987. He started by focusing on lab safety and chemical use management, and he's evolved into the broader safety and environmental compliance area. He's played a leadership role in many capacities here at the college, and we're very fortunate to have John here. He holds degrees from SUNY Cobleskill and Oneonta in biology and chemistry, and with another speaker on the panel who I'll introduce in a minute, and Dr. Chris Nomura, who is not here today, they form our COVID-19 contact group. John will mention that. John is going to cover the capacity of our spaces and how we're dealing with that, face coverings, screening, testing, and a few other issues. To my far right is Sue Fassler. Sue has done work for Syracuse University Center for Sustainable Community Solutions, working in areas such as Puerto Rico on solid waste issues. She served 3 years in the city of Hallandale Beach in Florida, and she was playing the role there as Green Initiatives Coordinator. She then moved to Onondaga County and helped with the Save the Rain program, and she's been here at ESF, I can't believe this, almost 2 years now. Seems like just yesterday. Sue holds degrees in environmental studies and environmental science, both from ESF, as well as a degree from the Syracuse University Maxwell School. Sue will cover custodial and our cleaning, sanitizing, and disinfecting protocols, mail shipping and receiving, and issues with our vehicles. Last, to my immediate right, is Dr. Brian Ladette. Dr. Ladette is an assistant professor of epidemiology and disease ecology in our Department of Environmental and Forest Biology. He's worked in emergency medical services as an EMT paramedic prior to and during his undergraduate studies. He has degrees in community and public health. He has a doctoral degree in veterinary medical sciences where he studied vector-borne and other infectious diseases. Brian likes to say that most people know him as the tick guy. We're, again, really fortunate that Dr. Ladette is here with us at the college and here with us today. Brian will cover more about the virus, including transmission issues. He will also talk about testing, screening, tracing, and our overall state of preparation from his perspective. We're also joined off camera by Tim Blehar, who heads our Human Resources Department, and Stephanie Specchio, who heads our Communications and Marketing Office. They're here to help out as needed. All right, so some instructions. We do have a Google Doc. You will see a link to that in a minute. Some of you are familiar with this. It's a live document that is available to us after the town hall is over. I will be monitoring it to my left. It's something that after this, if you have questions, you can go back and put them there, and we will answer all the questions there. We also will take questions via the chat function in YouTube. We learned last week that some people are accessing this via their mobile phones and don't have access to the Google Doc. So we will take it both ways, and we'll do our best to manage questions coming from both those venues. Our intent is to answer every question we get. Whether we do so now or afterwards, we will answer all those questions, and we're in the process of answering all the questions that we've received to date. I make a suggestion to you to jot down your question before maybe asking it. We're going to go through the 3 presentations. They'll be fairly quick presentations. Those presentations may answer your questions that you have, so you might not have to ask it. I'll give you time after the speakers are done to write the question in the chat box or on the Google Doc. Again, we're committed to answering every question. It's likely you will think of additional questions, so again, use that Google Doc or send it to that email, communications@esf.edu. With that, I'm going to turn it over to John. John?
Thank you, Mark. Waiting the slide here with the PDF. Well, I'll be talking about the efforts that we've taken to restart the campus. The 4 topics I will be talking about is capacity of spaces, hygiene will be a topic that will be covered by Sue, but I'll also be covering face coverings, screening, and testing. I'm going to start with capacity of spaces. For this effort, they've been greatly reduced in the classrooms and in the laboratories and in the buses and vehicles. The classrooms specifically have been reduced in excess of 50%, but with the main goal of having a minimum of 6-foot distance between all the occupants in the space. The laboratories are much the same. They too were a challenge based on the way that the spaces are used. Students typically move around within a laboratory space to access the sinks and the fume hoods and other spaces where maybe supplies and materials are stored. So they were a particular challenge, and I want to thank the laboratory working group for the efforts that they put into that work. Buses and vehicles to date have remained our biggest concern with regards to the transmission of the virus here. And so we have, of course, made those the most restrictive in some senses. And those are reduced to 50% maximum capacity and the wearing of the face mask for the entire duration. 50%. With regards to face coverings, those of you that have been paying attention to this since early in this event recognize that face coverings were not initially recommended, but then it was discovered that they were of benefit in this instance, and they rapidly became in high demand, and we struggled to get them. Fortunately for us here at ESF, we do have the relationship with Upstate University right next door, and through them we've been able to maintain an adequate supply to date. And as of very recently, we received a large shipment from them that we currently have in our possession. So we have the number right now that we expect that we will need of surgical masks. We have an upcoming order of cloth masks also that will be made available to employees that prefer the cloth mask, reusable, washable. I know that it's quite evident that some people do like that mask instead of the surgical type disposable mask. And then for laboratories where there are eye and face hazards present, it was very early on recognized that the face mask combined with safety glasses introduce an additional safety hazard, specifically that those goggles very often get fogged up. So we did some experimentation with face shields, and we came to the conclusion that in those laboratories, again, where eye and face hazards are present, that we would be providing face shields for the occupants of those lab spaces in lieu of masks to prevent that fogging up effect. And I have here an example of that mask that we purchased. This is of very good quality, since they will be issued to the students in these labs, and they will be expected to be wearing them throughout this semester, and for what duration we don't know. We wanted to purchase something that was of very good quality. It will be issued to the individual student. It is their mask to keep and maintain, and they will use this mask in any of those laboratory classes for which they have an eye and face hazard. This mask in particular does a very good job of covering the entire face. It's very durable, and I fully expect it will last and endure the use that it will incur in these laboratories and in the transportation to and from different laboratories and from their dormitories. With regards to screening efforts, all of our employees here have to daily complete a health screening questionnaire, and that, of course, is documented, and any positive responses to that require follow-up on behalf of the college. Testing is a subject that I expect we will receive a lot of questions about here today. So I'm going to try to cover this in fairly good detail. All of Centennial Hall residential students will undergo testing, okay, via a pooled method, and positive pools will result in a diagnostic test for each individual within that pool. Off-campus students will have the opportunity to participate in voluntary and random testing early on in the semester and then intermittently throughout the semester. Our goal here is to, first of all, establish a baseline of any disease prevalence in the ESF community, and then determine if that changes throughout the course of the semester. Not only will we be using our data that we collect here at ESF, but we will also be in nearly daily contact with Syracuse University and monitoring their data that they are collecting from their testing, and looking for any changes in that disease prevalence. Okay. Follow-up for testing, we do have contact tracing efforts here. Brian Ladette, along with several volunteers, have undergone the necessary training and certification to perform this contact tracing. They're working in coordination with the Onondaga County Health Department to perform those efforts, to identify any contacts of discovered individuals that were infected, and make sure that we can keep this disease transmission limited to the greatest extent possible, and keep our population as healthy as possible. So that concludes my presentation. Sue will follow up with a further discussion on hygiene and some other topics.
Great, thank you very much, John. And as John just said, let's go to Sue.
All right, thank you, Mark. Thank you, John. So today I'll be giving a very brief overview and can add a lot more detail as people ask questions about custodial, mailroom shipping and receiving, and our college-owned vehicles. So we'll begin with custodial. So as a general reminder, or maybe this is the first time you're learning, there are a slew of FAQs online right now. So the ESF's main COVID webpage, if you look on the right-hand side, you'll see a facilities drop-down menu. There are questions there and answers for HVAC, custodial, mailroom, shipping and receiving, and the garage. So everything I'll be talking about today and much, much more is included in those FAQs. So I really encourage you to check those out. And we do review and update those on a weekly basis. So if you do have recommendations for changes, please do reach out to me. My contact info is included on the FAQs. So to set the stage, a safe built environment here at the college equals a shared cleaning responsibility. I'm not sure if the right slides are showing right now on the live for custodial, but I will talk through anyway. So the safe built environment is a shared cleaning responsibility. We have a custodial staff that is assigned to buildings, but there are only so many custodial staff members and a lot of students, faculty, and staff members potentially on campus. So in order to ensure that the high touch point areas on campus are disinfected, we will be providing disinfectant and microfiber cloths available upon request to any faculty and staff member or department that would like that. So we've already distributed probably close to 100 or more disinfectant bottles, and there are microfiber bin collection points in every single building on campus. So we do ask that once a week you place your microfiber cloth to be laundered in the bin. And very shortly on the ESF website, there's going to be an instructional sheet determining and telling you how to properly use disinfectant, as well as the locations for these microfiber bin collection points. So all of this information that's very detailed will be online at the FAQ. We're asking people to minimize the outside chemicals that they're bringing to campus. This is because we have a lot of people with fragrance sensitivity, so we want to be conscious of that. And we also want to make sure that the disinfectant used on campus is actually effective against COVID-19. So our custodial staff will be disinfecting high traffic locations at least twice a day. The full list of these areas is online. The campus community is responsible for disinfecting at communal spaces, and classrooms will be disinfected between every single class. So here is where we're going to be asking instructors and students for some help. We will have a cleaning log posted by the door of every single classroom and lab, and a detailed instruction sheet that will explain the proper way to either use the spray disinfectant or the provided wipes. So it's actually not recommended that we clean and disinfect in between every single class. So we're already going above and beyond by providing this ability. And I've actually worked with Rose, who I want to give a commendation to for reaching out to me. We talked about the best way to clean and disinfect some lab spaces, and we determined that not necessarily, that spray disinfectant wouldn't necessarily be the best way to do that there. So in talking with Rose, we have shifted to wipes to clean lab spaces. So you'll see that there's kind of a distinction between where spray disinfectant should be used on campus versus wipes. And this is because wipes, some of them shouldn't be used on electronic surfaces. So we're going to have labels on every single bucket of wipes that you'll see on campus telling you if that's for use on electronic surfaces or generalized surfaces. So I really implore you to really pay attention to the labels that you see around campus about instructions for use. When a custodial staff member enters your workspace, we ask that you please put on your mask as a sign of respect. This is something that we're asking the entire campus community basically to do. So I've mentioned before in previous town halls, but I like to think about mask wearing as a form of consent. So I will always err on the side of wearing my mask. I will not remove that mask until I have verbally agreed with someone that we feel safe enough, being far enough away from each other to do so. So please lend the respect to our operational staffs that are going in and out of buildings, in and out of offices, to wear a mask when you do see them enter your space. And also, this is hard for everyone. There's not one group of people that hasn't been impacted by this on campus. So please verbalize and show your appreciation to our staff. I want to give a huge shout out to the operational staff. Like every summer, but especially this summer, they have been here working so hard for the vast majority of this time, working on a myriad of projects, adding COVID preparedness onto all the good work that they do. We all really appreciate that, so please let them know. We'll shift to mailroom shipping and receiving now. So mail and packages are not disinfected when they arrive on campus. This is not recommended by SUNY or the CDC. However, staff will have disinfectant and microfiber cloths and/or wipes on them at all times. They will also be wearing gloves. So the goal of this is to minimize contact when delivering packages and mail on campus. So luckily this already is in place with mail. There are a few designated locations in each building or each department where mail is delivered, so that's already relatively low contact. Packages is a little bit different because we do provide a service where we deliver them to where they were ordered. But you can reach out to the stockroom if you would like to designate a pickup at our warehouse to kind of minimize the contact that you might have with someone coming into your office. Vehicle reservations. So there's a few changes here. Vehicles are able to be requested by faculty and staff members. Unfortunately, student clubs are not able to use vehicles this semester. Our vehicle request form has been updated multiple times throughout the summer already, so I will ask that if anyone wants to reserve a vehicle, you please download the most recent request form from the Vehicles and Busing webpage. Vehicle occupancy has been reduced by 50%, as John mentioned. This is rounding down. So say you have a vehicle that could potentially hold 5 people, it will now hold 2 people. So when you're in a vehicle, you need to have a mask on at all times, and vehicles are disinfected by garage staff between each trip. Physical barriers have not been installed in our vehicles that can also actually create potential liability and safety concerns, so we have not opted to go that route. Reoccurring bus trips for the semester, faculty or instructors will need to assign seating for the duration of the semester. This is really helpful for contact tracing, and the 24-passenger ESF bus template is already on the website, and very shortly there'll be about 7 more external bus templates. So instructors can download these. All the seats are numbered. You assign a student. We have the seats either blacked or redded out, showing you where people can sit and where they can't sit. So we're trying as hard as we can to make this as painless as possible by creating standardized and routine templates for people. It's also the responsibility of course instructors to pick up masks. So these can be picked up from Marlene Braun in the ANTS stockroom. So these are medical masks. They are not N95s. So medical masks must be worn for the entire duration of the class trip. Once you're to your lab location, you can switch to a cloth mask, or if distancing allows, with the consent of all, you may not need to wear a mask. So I know I buzzed through a lot of that real quickly. There's a whole lot more detail, and I'm happy to go into that. The one thing I'll leave you with is there's going to be a lot of signage, a lot of instructional material on the website and throughout campus, so please pay attention to that. Back to Mark.
Okay, thank you very much, Sue, and now we will go to Dr. Ladette.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Sue. That was a great presentation. So I'm here today to talk about a couple things. But first, I just want to say that this has been crazy. This has been a crazy year. And I know everybody is on edge. There's a lot of stress. Trust me, I'm in it as well. But I think as a community, as ESF community, we can get through this. We have the tools, and I'm going to go through some talks here. So a few kind of overviews of the situation at hand. Usually in science, and a lot of people in the audience today are scientists. That's what we do, right? Usually science takes place over years or decades. It takes a long time to invent new knowledge. And that knowledge doesn't go into the public right away. It takes time to disseminate and penetrate daily life. What we're seeing with COVID-19 is science in real time, and it's moving really quick. Most scientists listening, including myself, knows sometimes science works, often it doesn't work. And that's why you're getting mixed messages in the media, and we just have to bear with it, just like you bear with an experiment that fails multiple times. Science is far from perfect, and we all understand that. So evidence and what we're presenting today could be different tomorrow, but we make decisions with the best evidence possible. So I'm going to go into some of those best evidence practices. One is non-pharmaceutical interventions, also known as NPIs. This has been stressed over and over in the public. These are the best ways to protect yourself and decrease SARS-CoV-2 transmission. So social distance, washing your hands, wearing a mask, not touching your face, and especially staying home when you're sick. And I'll talk about why that's important. So we as a community, if we follow these procedures, you can see it work. It's working in New York State. It's not working in other parts of the country, but it's working in New York State, and we can continue to do this and get through this. Let's talk a little bit about quarantine and isolation. This is kind of a confusing thing. We're all getting an epidemiology lesson, so most of you can probably pass my class now if you're interested. I'm offering it this semester online. Quarantine, what is quarantine? Quarantine is when somebody has been identified as a close contact to a known case, somebody who is positive for COVID-19. A close contact in New York State is defined as somebody as being in close contact within 6 feet of a positive case for more than 10 minutes. Therefore, to not be a close contact, don't be within 6 feet of somebody for more than 10 minutes. Social distance, wear a mask, wash your hands, don't touch your face. Quarantine lasts for 14 days. Quarantine is hard. It's not easy. If you are identified as a close contact, you will be contacted by the Department of Health, hopefully folks at ESF as well, to make sure you can get through quarantine, get through it. Make sure you have food, make sure you have access, make sure you don't have roommates that are going in and out of your room. And we at ESF are going to work with you on that, and I'll explain a little later on of how you can get help. Isolation. Isolation is the actual removing of a sick person from a population. So if you test positive for COVID-19, you will be asked to isolate by the Department of Health. The Department of Health will then investigate you and determine any close contacts through interviews. Isolation lasts for about 10 days. If you have symptoms, you can be removed from isolation after your symptoms abate, fever for 3 days, or the 10-day isolation period is up. So let's talk a little bit about testing. There's a lot of stuff going on in the news. You're inundated by it if you pay attention. All COVID-19 testing has their pros and cons. These pros and cons are especially exacerbated when you're looking at testing on a very large scale and in asymptomatic individuals. Tests are not often applied to asymptomatic individuals, especially so early into us understanding the disease. So there's 4 types of tests that are out there you've probably heard about. One is the nasopharyngeal swab, and this is the test you would likely get at your healthcare provider. This is the test that has a little bit of a turnaround time, anywhere between 3 to 14 days if there's a backlog. But it is the gold standard for diagnostics for COVID-19 infection. There are rapid tests. They've been called antigen tests. These are point-of-care tests that are done kind of at the bedside, and you can get fast turnaround results in about 15 minutes to an hour, depending on the platform. The next type of test is antibody testing. This is of limited use at the moment because we don't really understand how long these antibodies after exposure kind of last in the general population. And then lastly, there is something called surveillance and screening. Now, surveillance and screening is different from diagnostics. This is a term we use in public health to understand disease at the population level. And surveillance and screening tests are designed to test a large number of individuals and get you an understanding of what's going on. Surveillance and screening tests are often also followed up by gold standard diagnostic tests, and we'll talk about that. That's the plan here at ESF. So what is our strategy at ESF? We're taking a population surveillance approach. This really allows us to understand what's happening in a broad scale, what's happening in our community. And what the levels are and whether they're getting better or worse based on the interventions and just what is going on in general. The idea for testing is to survey high transmission risk groups. These are groups that are more likely to relax social distancing, mask wearing, hand washing standards than other groups. Therefore, we will be screening all Centennial Hall students upon arrival. This is important. I've described Centennial Hall as our cruise ship. This is a unique living situation, right? Not many of us have 499 roommates in a building. Centen does. And it's important for us to understand when moving people in that they're safe in the situation. We'll be highly encouraging all graduate teaching assistants to be tested, and we'll set up specific sites to get the GTAs tested. Why the GTAs? Well, they give us an idea of what's going on in the graduate student population. They're representative, so we can get an idea of what's happening in the graduate student population. Next, we will be doing random voluntary testing of the community during the first weeks of class. This will give us a baseline disease prevalence. There's limitations being a public university that we can't enforce a lot of this stuff, so volunteer. Come volunteer, do your part. Let's get an idea of what's going on in our community and whether we're getting through it or whether we can do better. We will also be doing random sampling and testing throughout the semester as needed. In the case of potential exposures, we can go in and test. I am on daily calls with SU, so we are exchanging information every day at 4:30 and knowing what's going on both campuses. So this is a very combined effort. Like I mentioned earlier, surveillance tests have their pros, but they should be followed up by diagnostic testing. And because we're targeting high transmission risk groups, that's usually the student body population, we're going to strongly recommend that positive pools in our surveillance then get follow-up testing at Crouse Medical Practice. This is within walkable distance to the campus, and we've been in constant communication with them about our plans. This is also where some of your student health fees go, so we should utilize this as a resource. So, do I have COVID-19? You should get tested if you think you have COVID-19. Students, we really encourage you to use Crouse Medical Practice. I put the number up here. This is the triage line. If you think you have it, call. Talk to the nurses. They can give you advice of what you should do. Staff and faculty should use their primary care physician. If you don't have a primary care physician, whether you're a staff, faculty, or student, there is a triage line at Upstate. It's the Upstate COVID-19 triage number. You can call and speak to a health care provider, and they can give you guidance on resources. Lastly, if you don't want to have COVID-19, I recommend not coming in close contact with a case. Now, you don't always know who is a case, but you can surround yourself around people you know are taking precautions. If you don't know that they're taking the right precautions outside of that room, then you should maintain social distance, wear a mask, wash your hands, and just be vigilant for your own sake. It's important because if you do come in contact with a case, you're going to be close contact as defined by the Department of Health. You're going to be under a mandatory quarantine. That's 14 days. And even a negative test doesn't get you out of quarantine. That's because you could be tested on day 1 of quarantine, be a negative, and on day 3, you could develop symptoms and have COVID-19. So realistically, don't be a close contact. And I know it can be hard in some situations, but we should be respecting each other, our distancing, our masks, just like Sue said, not just custodial staff, but everyone on the campus. So if you adhere to these NPIs I talked about and don't have close contact, the likelihood of infection is very low. And that gets to some of the questions about, well, I'm in a classroom, everybody's wearing masks, everyone's 6 feet apart, and somebody is positive in that classroom. We don't have a definitive answer on what the Department of Health will do in that classroom. We have proposed it. But if social distancing has been followed, mask wearing had been used, then there's very low likelihood of transmission and being labeled a close contact in that room. So the goal here is to break the transmission cycle, and it's important to know how the disease is transmitted. And I don't know if people have seen this, but the pie chart here shows that most transmission occurs in the pre-symptomatic in the orange or the symptomatic in the gray. 16% of all transmission is environmental, so on surfaces, or through asymptomatic transmission. So it's important. If you're symptomatic, you should not be going to class. That's going to get rid of 38% of transmission. Even mild symptoms, you should not be going to class. You should be contacting Crouse or your PCP. Pre-symptomatic are those individuals that are showing no signs and symptoms, are infectious, and will show symptoms a day or 2 later. This is where contact tracing is very important. When somebody shows up with symptoms and they've been in class for 2 days, or they've been around other people for 2 days, that's where we need to know what's going on. This graph right here shows you when you're the most infectious. So on the left, you have days after symptoms onset and then infectiousness. And you can see day 0 is when you develop symptoms. You're really infectious, highly infectious a day before symptoms develop. So once you have symptoms, we need to know ASAP to then understand where close contact has occurred to decrease these transmission events in our community. All right, after we identify a case, it's up to contact tracing and case investigation. So we're understanding that the Onondaga County Health Department are going to lead these efforts. What happens is when a case is confirmed through a laboratory diagnostic test, the Department of Health will interview that case, will notify them that they're in isolation, and will determine who are close contacts. And again, that is up to the case investigator, of which we are not case investigators. That case investigator will then identify those contacts, and the Department of Health will use contact tracers to notify contacts that they are under mandatory quarantine. And these quarantine and isolations are lawful orders, so they need to be followed. What are we going to do at ESF? Well, as of the moment, we're going to supplement DOH tracing efforts because our community is tight and we talk to each other. Outsiders, we may not be as open with them. And I've made that clear, and I think we can benefit our own community by talking to each other. So Student Affairs, as of the moment, are setting up voluntary reporting forms. There'll be 2 forms. One, if you think you've been a close contact, to fill out, and that will give us, and we'll give you information, and we'll be able to reach out to you and ask questions. And then 2, if you've been diagnosed or asked to quarantine, we would like to know, because we have resources. We can reach out and make sure you can get through this. Student Affairs is coming up with plans for students that may not have the means to get through a quarantine or isolation, and those will be outlined for you. My last slide is to talk about this academic year, because we're all in it together. ESF is committed in assisting anybody impacted by COVID-19, and I see it day to day, and we're working really hard to get the resources and to work with our community. We are all in this together. None of us are not in this together, so we need to be respectful. We need to follow rules to maintain health on our campus. And right now, I think we have the tools to succeed. We're seeing it in our broader community. We can do it on this campus. The Ranger School did it last semester. We're one of the only colleges to graduate in person. We can do it. I believe wholeheartedly we can do this. So with that, I think we're up to questions now.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Ladette. We have a substantial number of questions. And so I'm going to do my best to get through the chat, which is very, very long, as those of you who are watching YouTube can see. So again, if I miss something, it's not purposeful. We'll make sure we answer these after the fact. So I am going to try to characterize some of these. Some of them you answered already during your presentation. I'm going to go to you, Dr. Ladette, first, because there's a lot of questions relating to testing. Okay, so I think first of all, I'd like to ask our folks that are helping us with this presentation if you could find the slide that has the Kraus Medical phone number on it. We've asked, again, this is going to be available for people. Somebody noted in the chat that these are recorded. You'll be able to see that, but I think that was an important phone number. So if we somehow can find that slide, just throw it up on the screen while I'm talking here. There you go. So let's just keep that there for a minute. There's the Kraus Medical Practice number. Also, somebody put in the chat the Upstate Triage number. All right, so why just grad TAs being tested and not the whole student body? That's basically the gist of some of the questions here. So and you covered it, but I think it's important maybe to go back and talk about that again. Right.
Surveillance testing doesn't have to, again, test the whole population to give us an idea of what's going on. And testing has its limitations. So the idea is to test enough to get us an understanding of disease prevalence, and funnel those folks to the gold standard or clinical diagnostic test. But realistically, the only testing regime that could actually work for a population is a daily test every single day, the way this disease works. And it's just not feasible to do that. So we have to work within the confines and what we can do that gives us quick turnaround so we know what's happening, as well as just benefits the most as possible. And we're exploring a lot of options, trust me. I'm working very hard in exploring any option we can to acquire testing and novel testing and working with other providers. So I hope that answers the question.
Okay, yeah, thank you. And again, to restate, as I said earlier, where is the information posted? esf.edu/restart. esf.edu/restart. On the right-hand side, you'll see a tab that is a drop-down for town halls, and that's where all the recordings of all of these will be posted. But we also will be putting the answers to all these questions there when we do that. And certainly we're going to have to take some time afterwards to answer some of these. I'm sure we're not going to be able to get through all of these right now. Just as an aside real quick, John, would you mind putting on the mask, the face shield? We've had a request to see what it actually looks like and how far down it goes on your face.
Well, that's an interesting
Yeah.
request. Yes. It does cover a fairly extensive amount of your face and neck. It was the largest, I don't know how well everybody can hear me, but it was the largest mask that we could find coverage-wise, horizontally and vertically. It is, again, as I said earlier, pretty heavy duty. Heavy in that it's thick shield material, extremely resistant to cracking or breaking, and very durable. The same thing with the headgear. It's the most comfortable of the ones that we did experiment with. And keep in mind too, availability of these as well as other personal protective equipment related to this event is extremely difficult to get. So we were very fortunate to get such a good unit in the time frame that we did.
Okay. Thank you, John. Early on, I'm going to look at the Google Doc first, and again, we see a comment that you can't find the Google Doc. It's not there yet, so we will post it with the answers, and we will definitely send something out versus via Campus News and our social media and other mechanisms to let you know when it's there. Vehicles. So a question about whether students in particular, can take their own personal vehicles to field trips, research and that kind of thing. So I think that is a question you need to ask your faculty member, your instructors. For instance, I'll give you an example at our Heiberg property where a lot of our people are going in Tully. We simply don't have the room there in the roads for multiple vehicles. So again, work with your faculty members, instructors, research leads. They'll help you answer that question. And I don't know, Sue, if there's anything else you wanted to say about that. I think that's the answer there.
Yeah, so on our online FAQs, it's the last question on the garage one, or the vehicles one. So faculty and staff, yes, it's the college's current practice to allow people to drive their own personal vehicles, but this must be approved between your employee and immediate supervisor, and that includes potential approval for reimbursement of travel costs by the college. So students, it will be a case-by-case basis. On the FAQs, it does say the decision has not yet been made, but will be determined. So in this week's round of updates, I will update that online.
Okay. I'm going to turn to somebody you're not going to be able to see on camera, but I mentioned earlier Tim Blehar from our Human Resources Department is here. There were a couple of early questions that I think that he's best to answer. So first one is, how does paid quarantine leave work? How does paid quarantine leave work for grad employees? How can we access it? How long is that paid leave?
Okay, so the quarantine period is for 14 days, so normally that's 10 work days. The way that it works is you would have to contact either Ellen Brown or Amy McLaughlin in the HR office. Give us the circumstances. There's no generic answer for this. There's certain criteria that have to be met before you would qualify for the paid quarantine leave. So your first step would be to make contact with the two individuals I just mentioned in our office, and they would then take that information, and if it's cut and dried, they would give that to you on the spot. Otherwise, we would consult with John and Brian and get back to you with if it would qualify or not. But it would be 10 paid days while you're on the medical leave for a total of 14 days. Hope that answers the question.
Okay, I'm going to stay with you for a minute, Tim. And if you can't answer this, fine, we'll get the answer afterwards. What are the expectations for faculty to have a written plan for an employee absence so that if a TA is sick or under quarantine, they will know that other TAs will not be put in a position to cover for a TA who gets sick?
I'm not sure that would be addressed through HR, but if you have a work plan in place and a TA can't make it or is sick, there has to be some way to make up for that. But keep in mind that every TA appointment is between a 10-hour appointment or a 20-hour appointment per week. So, they have to stay within those parameters pretty much. I mean, it does fluctuate a little bit from one week to another where it might not be exactly 20 hours, then the next week it might be a little more, but it has to be within reason. So I'm not sure of a requirement. That might be between each department chair and the provost more than it would be an HR response.
Okay. I'm just going to go to Sue for a minute. Sue, a couple things about custodial. Do we have enough custodial staff? I think that's a couple questions related to that. Do we have enough custodial staff to do what's needed to be done? And then, Tim, there was a question about will custodial staff be getting hazard pay? So you can consider that while Sue is answering the first question.
So pairing our custodial staff with our community support and the amount of disinfectant and wipes that we have purchased, absolutely, we have the potential to keep campus safe. So I will expand a little bit upon classroom and lab cleaning because I glossed over it quite quickly. So for the vast majority of classrooms, every single classroom will be provided with a bottle of disinfectant and microfiber cloths. There will be a cleaning log placed by the door as well as instructions for use. A step-by-step, you walk in the classroom, you do X. You teach, you do Y. So it really does break it down step by step. So the vast majority of classrooms will have spray and microfibers. Our largest classrooms like Ellick 5, Baker 145, and Baker 146 will have disinfectant wipes soaked in our own disinfectant. There is instructions for use there. And we're asking people if you can use more than one wipe to clean an area around you, that's great, because we are ESF, and we want to cut back on materials that we use, and it also saves money. So for computer lab spaces and electronic teaching equipment, we will have ethanol wipes, which will be labeled for electronic use only, because there is a distinction between what can be used on a hard, non-porous surface and an electronic surface. So I know this sounds like a lot of moving parts, but I promise things will be in writing in the classrooms, things will be labeled, so all you have to do is follow that. And lab spaces will be cleaned with those disinfectant wipes because, again, in talking with Rose, we realized that there can be some sensitive instrumentation and equipment on lab benches, and it might not be great to spray those areas with a water-based solution. So in closing, there is a very detailed cleaning plan. I encourage you to check out the FAQs online. We can go into as much detail as you want to talk about the breakdown of what spaces on campus will be cleaned when. But it really is on all members of the community. But our custodial staff, we've been having at least monthly meetings since we all came back to campus, which was, feels like a lifetime ago, but it's been a few months now. Everything is in writing. We did provide an in-writing training guide, so if anyone wants to see that, we can share everything. So we have the documentation to show people and put their minds at ease for our cleaning plan. Oh, I forgot to mention one more thing, sorry. So we did get, what was it, John, like 3,700 bottles of 2-ounce spray hand sanitizer. So everyone on campus will have a 2-ounce spray hand sanitizer, and there are refill stations located in every building on campus, and that is in writing too and will be on the website very shortly. So multiple layers of disinfection safety here.
Okay, thank you. Shifting to another topic, mask wearing. Some graduate students say that they were informed that there are some instances where instructors will not need to wear a mask during class. I don't know that that's the case, because if that is the case, they're asking for written guidelines on this. So I don't know, John or Dr. Ladette, is that something?
Well, certainly we want to establish social distancing as the most important component here in our effort to combat this transmission. So we do have a plan that says that at a minimum you must be 6 feet apart at all times. And in the classroom, it's indeed a special place from the standpoint that it's a confined area. So yes, we would like everybody in that space to be wearing a mask because of the increased level of transmission risk. Again, confined space, limited amount of air. It's very similar to a bus from that perspective. So yes, most ideally, everyone in the space should be wearing a mask.
Okay, so we will get clarification out on that. Back to you, Dr. Ladette. Again, testing. First of all, the tests at Krause, there is a cost to the students for those tests. Right, that's the first question.
That would be, it would be covered by, again, I'm not the Krause, but it should be covered by insurance, which all students are required to have. as of now, and I've seen some questions about testing turnaround time, and this is a big hot topic across the country. You know, there are some tests that are taking 14 days, and it's like, well, that's not useful. I agree, but that's because of demand. As of now, we've been informed that we can get turnaround in 2 to 3 days. But if you are likelihood of or being tested, you're likely going to be told to isolate until you have a test result back, and that's up to the healthcare provider to inform you. And if you are informed of that, again, please reach out to Student Affairs with our forms so we can follow up and understand what's going on and offer any assistance that we can.
Yeah, and that was the second question, is the insurance question as well, so appreciate you answering that. We're going to go here for another 15 minutes, I think. We did start late, so there's no way we'll get through all these questions by then. I understand that, so I'll be sure that we address these after the fact. So I'm trying to scan through to see what else we might want to address. I see questions like, are there going to be recreational activities for students on campus? We will address that. I know that Laura Crandall, Student Affairs, is very concerned about that, so we are working on student life issues that are very important, so stay tuned for that. There was a question about are there multiple sizes of the face shields, but I think that face shield is pretty adjustable, John.
Yes, it does have multiple adjustments on it, so it is indeed universal.
Dr. Ladette, could you talk a little bit about ventilation and air filtration issues? There have been some questions about people not being in windowless rooms or windows that don't open. What's the role of air conditioning, those kind of issues?
Yes, I know that the physical property, the staff is working on upgrading to the extent possible our air handling systems to increase the airflow and add increased filtration ability. As far as transmission occurs, you know, there are research reports coming out about, you know, transmission in these types of settings, super spreader events. It's important to note that all of these examples have been with symptomatic individuals. So what we're seeing is that when you're symptomatic, there's more likely for this event to occur. That's why when you're sick, you should be staying home and talking to your healthcare provider. Again, in a room, 6 feet apart, wearing a mask, there's low likelihood of infection, but again, the definitive answer on a close contact would be made by the Department of Health during the case investigation process.
Okay. Again, trying to focus here. Face shields, again. So the statement here, John, is face shields, or Dr. Ladette, face shields are not recommended by CDC as a mask replacement. Can you comment on this? And can faculty teaching labs have students wear masks instead of shields?
Okay, so I can comment on that. In New York State, face shields are indeed considered an acceptable form of a face covering. So we're going by that. We're obligated to go by that for anybody who chooses to wear a face shield, along with any of the other acceptable forms of face covering. And please repeat the other part of the question.
Find it here. Can faculty teaching labs have students wear masks instead of shields?
Yes, thank you for the reminder. So we've determined that the face shield in combination with the safety glasses is the route that we want to go for the assured protection of that individual. Currently, there are no plans to accept the combination of a mask and the safety glasses in the laboratory space, where the eye and face hazards are present. So yes, it's not an alternative is the answer to the question.
Okay, thank you. Two related questions, Dr. Ladette, and I know you addressed this, but again, I think it's an important one to reiterate. How do we expect off-campus students living with roommates to quarantine or self-isolate? And then the follow-on statement is many examples of the off-campus housing that our students live in only have one shared bathroom, for instance.
It's tricky. That's tricky. And again, in training through the Department of Health, that is part of the what contact tracers and case investigators talk to the person about, either the case or the quarantine person, to work through unique situations. We at ESF are going to offer, in-house resources, especially people to talk through these situations with students that are in these types of experiences. That's why we need you to reach out to us, because we may not know who you are. And I can't speak to all what Student Affairs is doing, but there will be an announcement of the resources that will be available for students, including off-campus students. And the bathroom. So the bathroom situation, I'll give you an example. If you do have a roommate and one is in quarantine and one is in isolation, it's not ideal to have a single bathroom, but a bathroom can be disinfected after use. I know, and I'll give an example, in my research plan, if a single bathroom needs to be used, it should be heavily disinfected after use to decrease transmission. There are plenty of situations where there are cases in the household and transmission does not occur to the rest of the household. I know personal situations that has not occurred. So it is doable. It does take increased vigilance, but we're here, the Department of Health is here to inform you on those measures and to keep you as healthy, as safe as possible.
Okay, thank you. A couple of comments about just the time it's going to take to move from class to class, whether it be a different modality from residential in residence class to online or online to in residence, and how are we going to be managing that? And are we going to be providing space for our students to maybe stay on campus to do the online class? I appreciate all those questions, and we will talk to our academic affairs department about this and be sure that we get a little more information out there about options for this. It's a completely, it's a serious and legitimate concern. Back to masks, and masks are so important, so let's stay on this for a minute. Interesting point here, and I think we ought to use this to, again, reiterate the importance of what we see as far as mask wearing. Can an instructor require students to wear masks in class as opposed to your guidance that they should wear masks? So I think we just need to be clear on what we're saying there. I don't know who would like to take that. John?
Well, yes, that would certainly be me. In class, and I'm sorry if I misspoke using the word should, but classes must wear masks, okay? So there's been an occasional question presented in the past in regards to the type of mask that must be required in a classroom setting. And referring back to the governor's executive order, we do have to permit in general areas such as the buildings and in classrooms, any form of face covering that is acceptable underneath the executive order. For other particular spaces, such as laboratories and in buses, where there's this recognized increased level of hazard, we do have the legal option of requiring a specific type of face covering or additional protective measure.
Okay, and then enforcement of mask wearing, a number of comments about that. And there was one reference to an earlier town hall where it was inaccurately stated that call the police, the university police, to enforce face mask wearing. That is not something being recommended. That was quickly clarified at that town hall, so that is not an option. So can we address that, how we see enforcement of mask wearing? And I don't know who'd like to first take a stab at that.
I'll start.
Okay.
So I see it all around us. If you're in the Syracuse, Onondaga County, you go out and people are wearing masks in the stores. I think this is going to be a community enforcement. It's going to be up to all of us to respect each other, as Sue mentioned, with our staff, with our faculty, with other students, because you don't know their situation. And until you know their situation, you should be social distancing, wearing a mask, and mentioning to people, look, you should be wearing a mask. If someone were to walk in my office, I would say, please put a mask on. until we were at a level where we were both comfortable maybe not wearing a mask. That would never happen in my case because I've been very adamant about watching myself. But I see it being a community issue, and I think we can all step up to address this.
And I can comment on that too. So as I mentioned, operations staff have been on campus for the majority of the semester, or sorry, the summer. And we have had some instances where other people who are on campus shot me an email and said, hey, Sue, I've noticed a few members congregating in X area, not properly wearing masks. Could you please remind them? So that's the best way to go if it's a faculty or a staff member. And I myself, even this week, I sent a reminder email to some of my colleagues and some faculty members saying, hey, I've heard through the grapevine that this individual isn't wearing a mask. It's not to try to get that person really hit hard. It's just, can you give a friendly reminder? So I would say that that's absolutely the best route to go. And also, if someone does remind you or ask you to put a mask on, I would encourage you, I mean, we've seen the videos, the really ugly videos of people snapping, and that doesn't create like the trusting, safe atmosphere that we want on our campus. We want you to be like, oh, you know what, I forgot, I'm sorry, put it on. And I just did see another comment. So something that I am seeing a lot of is the old mask under the nose. So that's another reminder. If you see someone wearing a mask improperly, please do let them know, like, hey, mask up above your nose. And some of our custodial staff were thinking of some pretty clever little taglines. So, and I saw that was a conversation that we brought up in one of the earlier town halls. If we want to come together as a community and create some good branded messaging, why not?
Okay, and staying with the mask enforcement, again, really substantial concerns about this. If I'm teaching a lab and a student does not have a mask, do I have the option to remove them from the lab until they return with a mask? And I would say the answer to that is yes. And we talked about this yesterday, and if there's a continuation of the lack of willingness to do this, we don't want to see this happen, but instructors have the ability to close the class down at that point. And I know that's a pretty big deal, but I'd like to see if John or Dr. Ladette would like to address that, just trying to carry this through on this enforcement and what happens if students don't comply, if you will.
I really hope we don't have that problem. I really hope we as a community don't have to deal with that, and we can respect each other. As far as the enforcement, that's outside of my realm. But as a faculty member, if I was having a non-compliant student, just like in a syllabus or any other situation, we do have the ability to recommend them to student affairs or do other things for disciplinary action.
Okay, let's just do one more. I know we've got a whole bunch. We've still got them streaming in. The intent is not to shut down this dialogue, so we may even have to do another town hall on this subject, but we certainly will answer these in other means, as I said. Will masks be provided? So let's talk about that again, John. I know you and I talked about that before this started, so could you reiterate if a student forgets a mask and comes into the college?
Sure. Currently, we have in excess of 10,000 masks on hand. And we have, through Upstate, the ability to get many more. We have a journal voucher established with Upstate, so we can relatively quickly make additional purchases of masks and get them on campus. So currently the plan is to have them supplied to employees as is required by law, but students are expected to provide their own masks. But it's also recognized that students might occasionally bring a mask or fail to bring a mask to class. So there will be provisions made for those, what should be very rare occurrences. This should not be a daily thing where students are coming to class without a mask. And the reason for that is if they've come to class without a mask, that means that they've entered the building without a mask. They have perhaps been in the bathroom or congregated with other students in the corridors, and then subsequently arrived in class and sat down without a mask. That's too late by that time. Everybody entering the building should have a mask in their possession and be prepared to put it on when they come within 6 feet of another individual. And I would really hope that would be very clear and everybody would understand this as their responsibility, as Brian and Sue have expanded upon to what I think is a very lengthy extent.
Okay, again, we've got questions coming in, and it's gonna be difficult for me. There was one, can we answer the questions that have been asked regarding the threshold of disease prevalence on campus that will trigger a shutdown? I think we're gonna have to end on that one. So again, the threshold of disease prevalence that will trigger a shutdown. You did talk about the role of the county health department, Dr. Ladette.
Right. There's not a magic number. This is going to be in close communication with the county health department, as well as our colleagues at SU, about what the baseline is and how it's going. And then in the instances where you can have spotty outbreaks, those can get pretty significant, and efforts to investigate and contain can be extensive. But I think those decisions will have to be made working together with the county health department as well as SU. I don't think there's a number answer for you.
Okay. All right, we're going to have to end this town hall. Again, we will work hard on these questions and comments, and there's been some suggestions here that I think are very worthwhile for us to follow up on. So we will get back to you. Stay tuned to all of the avenues of communication that I mentioned earlier. We very much thank our presenters for being here, and we thank all of you for watching. And again, we'll be back to you. Thanks so much.